You know, it's kind of funny how the mind works. Imagine you're sitting outside on this perfect summer evening, right? You're trying to enjoy the sunset, and there was this one single mosquito just buzzing right by your ear.
Oh, the worst.
Right. So you swat at it, you wave your arms around, you're cursing at it under your breath, and before you know it, you've spent the entire beautiful evening completely focused on this one tiny, annoying insect. You just give it all of your energy.
Yeah, and the more you fight it, I mean, the more agitated you become. The sunset is completely forgotten at that point,
Yeah.
and your entire reality just shrinks down to that one source of irritation.
Exactly. And today we are looking at how to stop giving that exact same energy to our own toxic thoughts. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today for you listening is mastering a highly specific, ancient psychological tool for mind management, and it's drawn directly from a text called the Vitakasana Sutta.
It's a fascinating text, really.
It is. But okay, let's unpack this because that name is quite a mouthful. Basically, we are looking at an ancient Buddhist discourse from a collection known as the Majjhima Nikaya. And specifically, we're zooming in on text number 20, which offers this incredibly practical framework for dealing with what it calls unwholesome thoughts.
Right, which we would probably just call intrusive or negative thoughts today.
Yeah, we're talking about those negative, unhelpful thought patterns that just seem to totally hijack your attention out of nowhere.
You know, the progression in this specific text is remarkably logical. The sources we're analyzing today focus on Chapter 3 of this discourse, which outlines the third method for withdrawing your attention from these unwholesome thoughts.
The third method. So the text assumes you have already tried the first two methods it recommends.
Exactly.
Right. So if you are keeping track of the roadmap here, the first method was essentially swapping the channel, replacing an unwholesome thought with a wholesome one.
Like changing the subject in your own mind.
Yeah. And then the second method was reflecting on the actual disadvantages of that negative thought, taking a hard, rational look at the damage it's doing to you. And just a quick tease for you guys, our sources indicate there is still another chapter and a fourth method to follow this one.
Which we will definitely have to tackle in a future deep dive.
Oh, 100%. But for today, we're zeroing in on this third method because the real question here is, well, what happens when those first two methods completely fail?
Which they often do.
Right. What happens when you try to think positive thoughts? You try to rationally explain to yourself why being angry isn't helping, and that mosquito of a thought is still just buzzing loudly in your ear?
Well, that breaking point is where we actually need this third method.
Mm.
Because the text acknowledges a very frustrating reality about the human condition sometimes. Despite your absolute best efforts to replace a thought or reflect on its downsides, the negative thought just continues to arise.
It's just so stubborn.
It is deeply stubborn. And if we look at the mechanics of why that happens, it really comes down to deeply established mental habits.
Like getting stuck in a rut.
Yeah, over many years of repeating a specific type of worry or, say, a specific flavor of anger, your brain has carved out a neurological superhighway for that thought. In modern neuroscience, there's a famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together.
So the brain essentially gets exceptionally good at being anxious about that one specific topic. It just becomes the path of least resistance.
Precisely. When a thought pattern is that heavily reinforced, simply trying to think a happy thought or rationalize with yourself, it just isn't enough to derail the momentum. The groove is just way too deep.
Okay, here is where I think modern listeners might throw up a red flag, though. Because when we look at the source text, it specifically says, and I'm quoting here, he should pay no mind and pay no attention to those thoughts. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that just suppression? Are we just pretending the problem doesn't exist and shoving it down deep into some mental closet where it's just going to, fester and cause a massive problem later?
It sounds like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, because modern psychology usually tells us that suppressing our feelings is a terrible idea.
That is such a crucial distinction, and it's exactly where people often misinterpret this specific practice. The sources are actually very clear on this nuance. This third method is absolutely not about forcing the thought away.
Okay.
It is not about pretending the thought doesn't exist out of fear. It is a deliberate, conscious refusal to give that thought any further attention out of wisdom.
Out of wisdom. I like that.
Because think about the physical mechanism of suppression. It requires a massive amount of tension. You are pushing against the thought, actively trying to hold a door shut while something pushes back.
Which is exhausting.
It is exhausting, and as you pointed out, it usually backfires through what psychologists call the ironic rebound effect.
Oh, right. The classic don't think of a pink elephant experiment. The harder I try to suppress the image of the pink elephant, the more my brain has to keep checking to make sure I'm not thinking about it.
Which means you're constantly thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, the ancient text completely bypasses that trap.
Mm.
It offers a very vivid analogy to illustrate the difference between suppression and calm withdrawal.
Oh, the eyesight one?
Yes, imagine a person with excellent eyesight who is walking along a road. And as they're walking, they see something highly unpleasant or disturbing on the side of the road.
Like roadkill or something.
Sure.
Hmm.
Because they have good eyesight, they clearly see it. They aren't pretending it's not there. They aren't in denial.
Right.
But they don't just stand there staring at it. They don't walk up to it and examine it from every angle to figure out exactly why it's so gross. They simply close their eyes, or they deliberately look in another direction. And they keep walking.
I really like that framing. Acknowledging its presence, but denying it your focus. You see the internal wreckage, but you don't just stand there staring at it. But to really trust this method, to trust this idea of just looking away, I feel like you have to understand the underlying mechanics of why it actually works. Like, why does looking away actually kill the thought instead of just letting it grow in the background while you ignore it?
What's fascinating here is this brings us to the core psychological rule, established in the source material. Every single thought depends on attention to survive.
Attention is a key.
It is. Attention is not just a passive spotlight that highlights what's happening in your mind. Attention is literal food for the mind. It's the fuel.
Wow, okay.
When you replay an upsetting event, when you analyze it, when you imagine all the different ways it could have played out, you feel like you're solving a problem. But mechanically speaking, what you are actually doing is feeding the thought the energy it needs to continue existing.
The text uses a fire analogy here that makes this so concrete. It points out that just as a physical fire cannot possibly continue burning without fuel, an unwholesome thought cannot continue growing if we stop feeding it with our attention. Like, if you have a campfire and you want it to go out, you don't have to attack the fire. You don't yell at the fire or beat it with a stick.
That would be ridiculous.
You just stop throwing logs on it, you stop feeding it wood, and the inherent nature of the fire is that it will just eventually burn itself out.
We often overcomplicate our inner lives,
Yeah.
assuming we need to wrestle our demons into submission.
Right.
But this teaching relies on a very straightforward mechanism. Whatever we repeatedly attend to grows stronger.
Yeah.
And whatever we deliberately stop feeding gradually becomes weaker and naturally fades. The thought only has the power that you lend to it through your attention.
That makes total sense.
If we map this onto our biology, the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, it cannot tell the difference between a real physical threat in the room and a perceived emotional threat that you are just imagining in your head.
Okay, let me jump in with an analogy here, because thinking about this mechanism actually reminds me of how modern social media algorithms work.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Because when you're scrolling through a feed and you see a really toxic, outrage-inducing post, what happens if you click on it, read all the comments, and type out an angry reply? The algorithm doesn't care that you're angry, it just registers your engagement.
Exactly. It just sees activity.
And because you gave it your attention, it immediately starts serving you more of that exact same toxic content. Your brain's attention center is essentially the original algorithm.
That is so true.
Every time you engage with a toxic thought, you are signaling to your own internal algorithm, yes, this is important, give me more of this.
That is a phenomenal way to understand it. By arguing with the thought, you are driving up its internal engagement metrics.
Engagement metrics.
Yeah, you are telling your nervous system that this thought is critical for your survival. So naturally, your brain pumps out adrenaline and cortisol to help you deal with this threat, which only makes the thought feel more urgent and real.
So how does an ancient text from millennia ago apply to a chaotic modern day? Let's take this from theory to practice, because the text actually provides these incredibly relatable, mundane examples that translate perfectly to our modern stress tests.
They really do hold up.
Let's paint a picture for you. Imagine you receive a really rude text message from an acquaintance, just a completely out-of-line, passive-aggressive text. You read it, and your blood pressure instantly spikes.
We've all been there.
Now, you've already tried the first method you tried, replacing the anger with a wholesome thought. You thought maybe they're just having a terrible day, I'll send them some loving kindness.
And that didn't work.
It totally didn't work. You are still furious. So you tried the second method, reflecting on the disadvantages. You thought, being angry is just ruining my afternoon and spiking my cortisol. but your mind just keeps looping back to the screen. You keep thinking, why did they say that? Or who do they think they are?
Or, next time I see them, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think.
Yes, exactly. So what is happening there?
Well, this is exactly where the trap snaps shut. At this specific point, continuing to analyze the situation is no longer problem solving. It is entirely counterproductive rumination.
Just spinning your wheels.
Analyzing that rude text message is just throwing massive logs onto the fire of your anger. It feels productive, it feels justified, but mechanically, it is only strengthening the emotion and deepening the groove of that habit.
So what are the actionable steps? What does the source say you should actually do in that moment when your thumbs are hovering over the keyboard, ready to wage war?
The solution provided is remarkably grounded in physical action. First, you recognize the reality of the situation. You internally note, this thought is no longer helping me.
Just recognizing it.
That's step one, simple recognition without judgment. Then, without arguing with the thought and without getting mad at yourself for being angry, you gently withdraw your attention.
You just put the phone down.
You put the phone face down, you step away, you take a few mindful breaths to anchor yourself physically, and then you pivot to a wholesome, mundane activity.
Like what?
The text suggests things like washing the dishes, reading a book, going for a walk, or speaking kindly with a family member. You return your attention entirely to whatever constructive task is in front of you.
I love how ordinary those examples are. It's not telling you to retreat to a mountaintop or achieve some state of mystical trance. It's just go put your hands in some warm, soapy water and feel the plates.
Exactly. The sensory experience of the warm water and the smooth ceramic actually pulls your attention back into the physical present, which starves the mental fire.
But let's look at the second scenario from the sources, because washing dishes is easy enough during the middle of the day. What happens when you can't distract yourself with a physical chore? This is the absolute classic scenario, the 2 a.m. cringe attack.
Oh, a truly universal human experience.
Right. You are lying in bed, you're exhausted, you're desperately trying to sleep, but your mind decides to suddenly replay a really embarrassing mistake you made earlier in the day, or maybe even something you said 5 years ago.
It's always 5 years ago.
Always. And the more you think about how embarrassing it was, the more you try to rationalize why you said it, the more your heart races. You start sweating. You are getting more and more awake by the second. You can't just get up and start vacuuming the house at 2 a.m.
No, you can't. But the context changes while the core instruction remains exactly the same.
How so?
Well, instead of continuing the narrative, instead of letting the story play out in your mind where you try to justify your past actions or figure out what everyone thought of you, you simply notice the phenomenon happening. You mentally label it, telling yourself, this is only another thought.
You remove the heavy emotional weight from it.
Yes. And then you gently return your attention to the natural, physical movement of your breath, the rise and fall of your chest. You anchor yourself in the sensation of the present moment.
Okay, but I have to push back here on behalf of everyone listening because let's be realistic. The second I try to focus on my breath in bed, that annoying, embarrassing thought about what I said 5 years ago is going to pop right back up.
Of course it is.
It's not going to just quietly surrender the very first time I look away. It's going to demand my attention. What then? Does that mean the method failed? Does it mean I'm just bad at this?
Not at all. In fact, the sources anticipate exactly this challenge and explicitly reassure the practitioner about this dynamic. When the thought returns, and it absolutely will return, because a deeply grooved habit has momentum, you do not fight it.
Okay.
Think of a freight train. It doesn't stop the exact second you hit the brakes. It coasts for a mile.
Yeah.
You don't get angry at the train for obeying the laws of physics.
Right.
Similarly, getting frustrated with yourself for having the thought is just another sneaky way of feeding it energy. Every single time it returns, you simply acknowledge it without frustration. You patiently and gently return your attention to the task, to the breath, to the feeling of the sheets. You are not fighting the thought. You are simply persistently refusing to feed it.
Persistently refusing to feed it. Which leads perfectly into what I think is the most powerful and memorable analogy in the entire source document. This one completely changed how I picture my own mental landscape.
It's a great one.
It's the analogy for how we should relate to these stubborn mental intrusions that just keep coming back, demanding our attention.
The stranger at the door analogy.
Yes.
It is brilliant in its simplicity and really brings the whole concept together. The text asks you to imagine that a stranger comes up and knocks on your front door.
Okay.
Now, if you open that door and begin talking to them, engaging with whatever they're selling, arguing with their points, or trying to understand their motives, They are going to stay on your porch for a very long time. You are giving them a reason to remain.
You are basically rewarding them for knocking.
Furthermore, if you invite that stranger inside and you offer them a comfortable seat and you bring them food from the kitchen and you deeply involve yourself in their conversation, they may remain in your house for hours.
They basically moved in.
They've transitioned from a brief nuisance to an established guest. But if you hear the knock, you look out the window and recognize who it is, and you simply choose not to answer the door, a different process unfolds.
They just stand there?
They will knock a few times, they might even pound on the door a bit louder, but eventually they will realize they aren't getting any engagement, and they will turn around and leave. The text teaches that unwholesome thoughts behave in the exact same manner.
So basically, every single time we analyze an unwholesome thought, every time we argue with our own anxiety, or we pace around the room replaying an argument with our boss so we can win it this time in our head.
We've all done it.
Right, but we aren't actually defeating the thought. We think we are fighting the anxiety, but we are literally opening the front door, inviting the anxiety into our living room, and serving it a 3-course meal. We are making it comfortable.
You're feeding it.
Calm withdrawal, just washing the dishes, feeling the warm water, or focusing on the breath, is simply choosing to keep the door shut.
You hear the knock, you know the stranger is out there, but you are under no obligation to open the door and entertain them. Every time you calmly withdraw your attention, every time you refuse to serve the meal, that thought, that stranger gradually loses its influence over you.
And its visits become less frequent.
Its visits become less frequent, and its knocks become softer.
So what does this all mean for us in the long run? If someone listening right now actually starts practicing this today, if they successfully learn to recognize that knock, keep the door shut, and starve these thoughts of their fuel, what is the ultimate psychological payoff for their daily life?
Well, if we connect this ancient method to the bigger picture of our mental health, what this text is fundamentally addressing is the deeply destructive habit of rumination.
Rumination.
Yeah, rumination is that repetitive, endless, exhausting cycle of dwelling on upsetting thoughts, churning over hypothetical worries about the future, or wallowing in unchangeable regrets about the past.
Like the 2 a.m. cringe attacks.
Exactly. Many of us spend hours, sometimes entire days, caught in this cycle, assuming we are doing important emotional work. But this framework recognizes that this habit of rumination does nothing but strengthen our suffering. It generates endless unnecessary stress, keeping our nervous systems locked in a state of constant low-grade emergency.
Because we are just continuously feeding the fire of our own misery, totally unaware that we are the ones holding the logs.
By using this third method, by consistently and patiently withdrawing our attention from unwholesome thoughts, we actively interrupt this cycle. And the sources point to very specific psychological benefits that result from this practice.
What kind of benefits?
First, the mind becomes noticeably quieter. That constant, exhausting background noise of mental chatter drops significantly.
Yeah.
Second, your daily stress gradually decreases because you aren't constantly triggering your own fight-or-flight response with mental worst-case scenarios.
Your body finally gets the signal that it's actually safe.
Yes. Your emotional baseline stabilizes. You stop riding the roller coaster of your own passing thoughts. And perhaps most importantly, for anyone trying to navigate a demanding career or simply wanting to be fully present with their friends and family, your concentration becomes profoundly stronger.
Really? Just from not engaging with the negative thoughts.
Because your attention is no longer being fractured, hijacked, and scattered among endless uninvited thoughts. You have essentially reclaimed your mental energy.
That is massive.
Right.
Reclaiming your mental energy. Just to briefly recap the core takeaways from today's sources for you. Treat your attention as the ultimate currency, the literal fuel for your mind. Don't feed the fire of an unhelpful looping thought by analyzing it or fighting it.
Right.
Remember that the brain's alarm system doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a thought you keep obsessing over. And whatever you do when that anxiety knocks, don't answer the door and cook a 3-course meal for the uninvited stranger in your mind. Just acknowledge the knock, keep walking, go wash the dishes, and let the thought starve out on the porch.
It truly is a practice of profound self-compassion, brilliantly disguised as strict mental discipline.
I love that. Self-compassion disguised as discipline. Now, a quick reminder today we explored the third method in Chapter 3 of the Vitakasana Sutta. But as the text clearly lays out, there's still another chapter and a final 4th method to follow.
Yes, there's more to come.
So you can definitely look forward to us unpacking that conclusion in a future deep dive.
Before we wrap up, this raises an important question to leave you with. We've established that the sources define our attention as literal food for the mind. This implies that every single one of us has a daily invisible diet that we are constantly feeding our consciousness.
Ooh, an invisible diet.
And if we pull the lens back, we have to recognize that we now live in an attention economy. There are massive billion-dollar industries, from social media platforms to 24-hour news cycles, that are deliberately engineered using algorithmic precision to keep your mental front door propped wide open to strangers all day long.
They are literally hacking this ancient mechanism.
Precisely. So if we know that starving a thought kills it and feeding a thought makes it a permanent resident, what massive unnecessary stressors in your own life are currently thriving simply because you keep feeding them your attention without realizing it? And what would happen if you actively reclaimed your attention and put those highly engineered stressors on a strict starvation diet starting today?